Welcome to a regular Bellevue City Council meeting for Monday, September 26, 2022. City Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Mayor Robinson.
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes. Here. And Councilmember Zahn.
Here. Councilmember Zahn, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Happy to, Mayor. All rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have anyone signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have 10 pre-registered speakers this evening.
Excuse me, I forgot something.
Sure.
I'm sorry, we have a proclamation tonight, and it's a very important one. This week is Childhood Cancer Awareness Week, and we have our Deputy Mayor reading our proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to read this proclamation. Whereas cancer is the leading cause of death by disease among U.S. children between infancy and age 15, and is detected in more than 16,000 of our country's young people every year. And whereas an estimated 400,000 children and adolescents are diagnosed with cancer globally each year. And whereas 1 in 5 of our nation's children loses their battle with cancer, many more infants, children, and teens will experience long-term effects of comprehensive treatment, including secondary cancers. And whereas the city recognizes and acknowledges nonprofits and healthcare providers who deliver a variety of vital patient, psychological, and social services to children and undergoing cancer treatment, thereby enhancing the quality of life for these children and their families. And whereas we commend the determination and the bravery of children and families fighting the battle against childhood cancer. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of the City of Bellevue of Washington, on behalf of its City Council, do hereby proclaim September 25th through October 1st of 2022 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Week in the City of Bellevue, and we laud efforts to recognize, treat, alleviate, and ultimately eliminate childhood cancer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Do we have anybody to accept the proclamation? Okay.
We do not.
So who has signed up for oral communications, please?
Sure. We'll start over. That is 10 pre-registered speakers this evening for oral communications. And I'll remind the public before I start calling names, oral communications is for a total of no more than 30 minutes. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, and we can only allow 3 speakers to speak to any one particular side of a topic. It does not look like we're going to run into any issues with the topics. Our first speaker is David Bowling, who I believe is joining us virtually. Mr. Bowling, if you are connected to the meeting, can you use *9 to raise your hand and identify yourself? Okay, I do not see him connected. I will go to our second speaker, who is Adria Poublan. Perfect. Joining us in person. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Adria Poublan. I have moved to Bellevue 4 years ago after living in France for 30 years. And I am here tonight to speak on behalf of Trees for Livability. I agreed to come and speak with you after signing their petition for stronger tree regulation, simply because I love trees. I didn't even realize this before moving to the huge forests that constitute the Pacific Northwest, but I just love hiking, and when I do so, I can't help but contemplate the fact that the trees around us are old enough to have seen the first settlers arrive in the area. I think that trees are amazing because they provide shelter from rain during the long months of winter. They also provide shelter from sun during the heat waves. Personally, I didn't suffer from the heat waves these last 2 years because I never got hot because my house is in the shade most of the day, so it stayed nice and cool. Trees are also habitat to a wide variety of wildlife. This is something that's very remarkable for any newcomer here in Bellevue because there is an abundance of wildlife all around us, even in the very residential places. That's something that wouldn't be possible without trees. In my garden, in my yard alone, I have 4 rabbits, I have a bunch of squirrels, I have the occasional visit of a family of raccoons. This wouldn't be possible without the trees that are around my house. My heart is broken when I walk around my neighborhood and I just see these beautiful, perfectly healthy trees getting chopped down to replace a 1,500 square foot Rambler by a huge 5,000 square foot single family mansion with almost no backyard. I know that we can't control the way people live their lives, but I strongly believe that protecting our trees which, by the way, provide our second most important mean of absorbing CO2, is part of the answer to live more sustainably. So please let us keep our trees. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Sandra Grace, and Ms. Grace is joining us virtually. Ms. Grace, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Hi, my name is Sandra Grace. I live at 14216 Southeast Eastgate Drive, and we bought our home in 1985, so we've been here many years, and that's because Bellevue's a wonderful place to live. My neighborhood's a wonderful place to be, but recently things are changing, and every time I hear a backhoe or a bulldozer or a chainsaw, my heart just hurts because I know the rose bushes, the maples, the dogwoods, the cedar, our elders, the cedars and the Douglas fir are being cut down. And I know the previous speaker talked about some of the reasons we need our trees, and I agree with those. I go back to the beauty of them, the privacy we get, the noise they can get rid of. And now I'm finding I look more at concrete and bricks and glass and fences and other people's homes, and it's really sad. And of course, she mentioned the shade from this hot summer we've had, the home for our wildlife, and to know that trees and nature have healing effects on us. It releases stress and anxiety, and it's so important. And of course, the clean air with the pollution, the carbon, and now the fire, the smoke from all the fires. These trees that are being cut down aren't going to be able to do their work like they could. So I understand change is happening, but I think we can have a say and a control over how it goes about. And we need to do something before it's too late. Please accept recommendations from the Trees for Livability study. We need stricter codes and stronger enforcement. We need to please keep the city in a park. The city in a park. We need our trees, and now they need us. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Billy Heatherington.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and the rest of this prestigious council. My name is Billy Heatherington. I'm a proud member of Labor's Local Union 242, and my comments this evening are around the preliminary 23-24 capital budget. Looking over the executive summary that was included in the agenda, I applaud the City Council, City Manager, and staff for advancing programs in public safety, clean streets, affordable housing, equity, and inclusion. I would hope that the council and the city manager's office will continue to have great conversation and dialogue, will continue the great conversation and dialogue that we've had around apprenticeship utilization over the past year by funding a program in Bellevue that creates tremendous opportunity to leverage your capital, major capital projects by creating economic opportunity for the Bellevue community. It's a win-win for the city and its residents. The Seattle Building Trades, Labor's Local Union 242, believes strongly that an apprenticeship utilization program is the right next step for Bellevue and aligns well with the city's commitment to vision and priorities under their economic and workforce development. We also feel that the city's infrastructure work should be an extension of the K-12 system, educational system through state registered apprenticeship opportunities. Right here in Bellevue at Interlake High School, they have built a pipeline to these opportunities through their state registered pre-apprenticeship program. It's a CTE program there at Interlake High School. Apprenticeship is a proven earn while you learn model that provides a pathway to the middle class for underserved communities while giving its participants a transferable skill. Statistics show that 9 months after the completion of an apprenticeship program, 91% of all those that have graduated are still employed. Since spending 2.5 years of my life working on the Salesforce building just outside these doors a couple blocks, here in Bellevue, the city has really seen the skylines change. I was admiring some of the cranes before the meeting here too, and they're always off to me. But the addition of those dozen or more buildings that are going in downtown right now currently in the Sound Transit East Link extension that'll be opening next year is going to see the infrastructure needs only increase. Several cities in King County have recognized the importance of apprenticeship utilization and the impacts it has on building tomorrow's workforce. I would urge the council to do the same by allocating resources in the 23-24 budget on this important matter. Thank you, and I'll concede my time.
Thank you. I do see that David Bowling has joined us. Mr. Bowling, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. I just wanted to thank you for all you've done to help get shelter and service to men experiencing homelessness on the east side. I know we've all been working very hard to get a permanent place for these men who fall into homelessness to call home. What you have done has allowed men to find hope, healing, safety, and stability. Allowing us to stay in the Lincoln Center a little bit longer is allowing men who desperately need safety, shelter, and services to find that on the east side and not get stuck in our woods and on our streets. So I want to thank you for the decisions you've made to help the shelter be built and for us to be able to get just a little bit longer, a few more months in the Lincoln Center so the shelter can be built. I look forward to celebrating with you all in the new location in the first half of next year. And I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Thomas Doe.
Thank you. Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and council members, good evening, and thank you for providing me an opportunity to speak on the Save Coal Creek and the Isola plan development for Lakemont Boulevard. I'm Dr. Thomas Doe, and I'm a 35-year resident of the Somerset neighborhood of Bellevue. Coal Creek and Cougar Mountain Wildland Parks are my backyard, and I sincerely thank the city and its staff for their work on trail maintenance and excellent informational signage. My graduate degrees are in geology and mineral engineering, and I can attest to the park's educational value for all ages based on informational walks I have led and courses I have taught and assisted at UW. I am in awe and gratitude to the activists like Harvey Manning and David Kapler, who's speaking later tonight, who 40 years ago worked with a far-sighted Bellevue City Council and King County officials to make those parks possible. What an achievement. I am asking you, the officials of today, to be far-sighted like your predecessors of 40 years ago and consider what you can do for the people of Bellevue who will be here 40 years from now. The usage of Coal Creek Park is strong today, and parking is saturated at Redtown. The demands will only increase dramatically in the future. The pedestrian crossing from Redtown to Coal Creek is an extreme danger. I'm surprised more people haven't been killed there. There's an urgent need to use the land in question to support recreational uses while preserving its historic and natural ambiance. Today, the walk from the walk from Redtown Trailhead down Coal Creek Trail is an incredible experience. I'm sure most of you have done that. It's a walk a century back in time. Let's not replace that with a walk through somebody's backyard. Finally, I'm concerned about North Fork Falls, which is the waterfall on Lakemont Boulevard's Welcome to Bellevue sign. Unlike other waterfalls in the park, the lip of this fall is in glacial till, very soft material, rather than bedrock. It is eroding, and focusing the runoff from a new development into it is only going to increase its threat. You can put a dollar value on the land for luxury housing, but the value for future recreation and natural preservation is priceless. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is David Kapler.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the council and mayor and deputy mayor. My name is David Kapler. I'm the vice president for advocacy at the Issaquah Alps Trails Club. Issaquah Alps Trails Club was formed in 1979. In the early 1980s, Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park was created by King County. It's the largest park in the system. In 1990, the Issaquah Alps Trails Club planned a 5-day march from Snoqualmie Pass to the waterfront in Seattle. It was such a success and brought in the interest of Gary Locke and especially Jim Ellis, and Jim Ellis then formed the Mountain to Sound Greenway Trust at that time. And as you're very familiar with the trust and how important it is to the area, and the good work that you've done to work on the bike trail from Seattle to into Bellevue, hopefully into Issaquah before too long. One of the issues that came up, all of that process actually was very much helped by the Trust for Public Land. One of the issues that has come up more like in more recent times in 2017 is the concerns about safe access to the Cougar Mountain Park from both Bellevue and Issaquah. Issaquah, our mayor, Mary Lou Pauley, bit the issue and took it on and was very concerned about that. She ended up working with the Trust for Public Land, the state and the county, and raised $11 million to purchase property on Newport Way. Now, from the Issaquah Transit Center, in one block walk, you can enter 3,000 acres of open space. From the urban core in Issaquah, a 2-block walk, and you can be in 3,000 acres of open space. Bellevue City Council, by making the change to not on the quasi-judicial issue, you have the chance to be activists on making sure good things happen on Cougar Mountain, and that's going to be especially important. Right now, the safety from exit for Bellevue people or people from the west to enter Redtown is very much of a concern. You can see the huge difference between what Bellevue is able to do in their parks and King County, and part of it is being where one side of the rural land, the other on that. But please be an activist role as city council members and a mayor and a deputy mayor, and work to get safe and proper access and facilities for Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park and your own park system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Terry Burnett. And I believe they are joining us virtually. Ms. Burnett, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Your time begins now.
Okay. I am Terry Burnett. I've lived, I'm a Seattle native, and I have been living in Bellevue for the last several years. I hadn't really wanted to move over to Bellevue, but then I learned about the Greenbelt, and I love living in a forest just minutes from downtown. I'm here to speak in favor of the codes presented within the Trees for Livability proposal. I have to echo a lot of things that the first two speakers mentioned. I do love all the big trees. I've got firs and cedar and a pine and willows and an oak tree all back here, full of wildlife that is constantly changing. Birds that change throughout the seasons. The last few weeks I've had squirrels and jays working hard at harvesting acorns, and it's been so fun to watch. I've also bonded with my neighbors quite a bit over the forest, with a neighbor boy finding a nest in my backyard while watering while I was away and leaving it for me to enjoy. Another neighbor calling out eagles loudly more recently when I was able to step out along with his children and marvel at two eagles darting just below and just above my power line, swooping low and close to us. Not something very many people get to see while living in a city. Also seen a heron do a similar thing, startling me on my way back from my mailbox, only to land in the pine tree right off my bedroom window. I went to get some neighbors whom we all stood and watched in awe until it took off into the forest space behind us as well. Bellevue has long been known as a city and a park, and it is a wonderful place to be, but it also needs to be a city that is a park by keeping the trees that stretch through our neighborhoods, connecting all those beautiful spaces that you've created and maintained so well. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sally Lawrence.
Hello, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My topic is the proposed Isola planned unit development on Lakemont Boulevard in South Bellevue. For the past 5 years, while this development proposal was undergoing review, more than 4,600 people signed the Save Coal Creek petition opposing the development. Instead of 35 homes isolated from city services, this property could become a stellar part of Bellevue's Coal Creek Natural Area, or perhaps part of the King County Park across the street. This property is highly suited to the preferences of Bellevue residents for parks. The top vote getter in last year's survey of residents asking what their preferences were in future parks was to enjoy or experience nature and open spaces. The Isola property, if it could be acquired, would widen and improve the existing wildlife corridor between Cougar Mountain Regional Wildland Park and the Coal Creek Natural Area, and it could provide space for additional trails and improved access. And the upcoming Parks Levy, which you've approved, identifies some top expectations for the money if voters approve it, and among the top items are preserving open space, wildlife corridors, and developing trails. So this would be a great property to acquire, but as you know, there is a hitch. The developer, Isola Homes, has not volunteered to sell the property. Save Coal Creek believes that now, before the public hearing, is a critical time for several layers of government to come together with a funding package that will interest Isola. What can Bellevue City Council folks do about this? You may not want to be the lead on this, but you folks have incredible influence. You can use your contacts in the development community to help open a conversation with Isola. They need to hear from you that there is immense public interest in this property. Remember those 4,600 petition signers. You can work with your colleagues at the county and state government to develop a funding package. Save Coal Creek has already heard strong interest from county council. We are also reaching out to our state representatives because these parks are within 15 miles of 1 million people, more than 1 million people. And finally, Save Coal Creek appreciates the really good planning that Bellevue does. This is a city that plans ahead for parks acquisitions. In most years, the budget allows $1 to $2 million to be set aside for this purpose. This initial amount could be a catalyst for other parties to come together to offer a funding package. So please help us get traction under a funding package that will bring Isola to the table. Thank you for your good service to the city and for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. The next speaker on the list is Marguerite Richard.
Good day, everyone. I just want to say on the record that if I had to sing a song today, it would be I Need Thee Every Hour. And the reason why is because Honorable Michael B. Fuller frequented this chamber here discussing issues that are very important to me because I'm an indigenous black female. And so we lose some soldiers along the way, am I right? But I think the straw that broke the camel's back, we were sitting in City Hall, and we have some seats where everybody can sit. And a guard approached us. We were just sitting there waiting to go up to the chamber for the 2 o'clock meeting, and he asked us why we were sitting there. And we were like, what? And so, red flag for Michael to do something like that to him. So we said, we're going to the meeting. He said, there isn't any meeting. The meeting is canceled. The meeting wasn't canceled. I said, Michael, let's get on the elevator. So we got on the elevator. So then I guess it wasn't over. I just heard all this shouting because he was so taken aback. And I feel like they killed him because Michael's body was riddled with cancer before he died. And it's interesting that you made mention about the children with cancer. So anyway, he was a foreigner also. So these are grievous circumstances because he had no right to approach us. We're just, they have a sign that says Black Lives Matter. I gave you each a copy of how they responded about why that signage is there. And we're sitting right there in front of the sign, and then someone approaches us like that and does something like that to us. And I'm still emotionally distraught behind it. And then after him passing away, it just was like overblown. I don't know what else we can do. We're existing here because God allowed us to be here. Yeah, for just such a time as this, he allowed it. And just like he allowed him to come across that bridge, just like myself coming across the bridge to speak to you, because we have a constitutional right, like he always said, to address government without fear of retaliation. So that's what I'm dealing with now. It's like, is City Hall a safe place? I think not, just because of what happened. And so the next phase in life, I don't really know. It's kind of uncertain. But I keep coming because I think it's important for you to hear from all kinds of people. He was disabled. You all recognize the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Older Americans Act. And you're going to continue to see handicapped and disabled people.
Thank you. The final pre-registered speaker on our list tonight is Alex Zimmerman.
The Heil, my dirty damn Nazi fascist, my bandita and psychopath, mafia cartel. My name Alex Zimmerman. I want to speak right now about something what as I speak before 100 times for last 30 plus years, or 35. I speak right now to these 150,000 people who live in Bellevue, and I'm a little bit surprised why these people don't use their constitutional right to be a citizen. elect council who here, to me, look like a 7. Zombie, you know what it means. What is bring a city to total collapse. And every year, every month, it go worse and worse. So right now I speak to everybody. What is the reason elect a Democrat? What is make us life worse, not better? What is the reason for constitution, for election, when we can elect people who supposed to be doing us life better every year, not worse? This is exactly what has happened right now with Bellevue. I ask you, who control is city? 150,000 slave with 7 council, you know what this mean? Or Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Who controls this? Who brings this 1,000 and 1,000 people, and 50% probably from jungle, you know what this mean? What is not real American? I ask you, what is happened with Sound Transit 3? $100 billion Ponzi scheme. So, for example, King Country Council Balducci supports this in extreme point. You know what it means? You look right now. I drive around, I talk, my God, what's happened when trains start going every 15 minutes or 20 minutes? What has happened? Where I am right now? In Bellevue, a nice, beautiful city. What is supposed to be have 3, no more asphalt, no more building, no more people who not American. I'm sick from this. Is this exactly what has happened? All my life I fight for America, all my life. And what as I come right now, what as I see right now? It's totally confused me. What? War? World War III? Atomic bomb? This is exactly our future, what is we have right now. Stop elect Democrat. Everybody know for many years they destroy Bellevue, King Country in America. It's exactly what has happened. They not anormal. They are psychopath. More dangerous than Nazi or communist. So I speak right now, everybody who have IQ more than 60. Start thinking. Stand up. Change America back. Stand up, America. Thank you very much.
That does bring us to the end of our pre-registered list, and we have hit the 30-minute mark, so that would close oral communications.
Nobody else? Okay. So next we have the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we have 2 public hearings tonight. The first one, and both of these are coming before us tonight because council was briefed on them and asked the staff to bring them back for a public hearing. So, Mr. Miyake, I'll have you introduce them.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and council members. The first public hearing tonight is on the proposed land use code amendment relating to temporary public safety facilities. Joining us this evening are Nick Whipple, our Code and Policy Planning Manager, as well as Matthew Menard, Senior Planner, both from the Development Services. With that, I'm going to turn over to Nick for some opening comments. Nick?
Great. Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Noonhouse, and City Council. As City Manager Miyake and the Mayor mentioned, we are back tonight for a public hearing on the Temporary Public Safety Facility LUCA, or Land Use Code Amendment. This was last before the Council on September 6th, at which point the Council did direct us to schedule the public hearing. So we did provide notice of this public hearing, and we have an ordinance prepared for action this evening if Council wishes. So the recommended action tonight is to hold the public hearing on Ordinance 6676, and then following the public hearing, consider adopting Ordinance 6676. So for our agenda, we are going to provide an overview of the objectives of this land use code amendment and the different components of the LUCA as well. We'll talk about the process, including just a response to questions that were raised at the September 6th study session before closing with the ask for council to hold the hearing. So with that, I will turn this over to Matthew Menard to walk us through the slides.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Noonhouse, and members of council. I will start with discussing what a public safety facility is and how our code addresses those. So essentially, a public safety facility is a facility that is permitted under a declared natural disaster or unforeseen emergency circumstance. It does need to be declared by the city manager before we would allow a temporary public safety facility. An example of that is currently the men's overnight shelter at Lincoln Center, as you heard about from the public comment. Our current code allows one 24-month approval and then one 12-month extension on top of that. And temporary public safety facilities are exempt from the discretionary land use approvals. So the objectives of this LUCA is administrative only. Basically what it does is allow for multiple extensions, so it doesn't change any of the criteria for approving a temporary public safety facility. It ensures continuity of services throughout the emergency circumstances. So at this point in time, if an emergency circumstance was going to last for more than 36 months, we would have to discontinue that emergency circumstance. This would allow that, or discontinue that temporary public safety facility, sorry. This would allow that facility to continue on past that 36-month period. Again, it does allow CFH to continue operating their men's overnight shelter at Lincoln Center as they prepare to open their new shelter, which is expected in completion of Q1 of 2023, as again you heard from public comment. So the proposed LUCA, there's two proposed changes. It revises the start period for the LUCA, so it would start at the date of approval rather than the date of beginning of operations for the temporary public safety facility. And this is to be more consistent with our current code. It also gives us a paper trail, so it's a little bit easier for us to understand when the facility began. It would allow multiple 12-month extensions where appropriate, supported by that emergency declaration. I should note that you would not be able to extend a temporary public safety facility beyond the declared emergency. So once that declared emergency is over, the temporary public safety facility would have to cease operations. Again, going back to the men's shelter at Lincoln Center, it would allow that to continue to operate until the declared emergency by the city manager is over, which would be when they open their permanent facility in Eastgate. Addressing the question from the last meeting, which we were questioned, why not set some boundaries at this? Why unlimited? We do think that there are safeguards within the code to ensure that even with unlimited extensions, there won't be a significant negative impact to the people of Bellevue. The extensions are limited to that emergency period, as I mentioned. That's at the discretion of the Director of Development Services. So there is some wiggle room there for them to make that call. It's also that director can condition the approval of temporary public safety facilities to make sure they are compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. So if we do think there is some incompatibility there can be some sideboards put on that. In contrast with our current code, it will allow us flexibility to allow that continuity throughout the emergency period rather than having that hard end date, which would force a cease of operations when they may be providing vital services as the current men's overnight shelter is. And we are relying again on the city manager and the development services director to have the best interests of the people of Bellevue in mind to ensure that everything is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The process of this LUCA, as Nick mentioned, we did have a study session on September 6th where it was requested that we move it on to this public hearing. We did provide a joint notice of application and notice of public hearing in our weekly bulletin. We did provide a notice of public hearing in the Seattle Times, and we're here tonight holding a public hearing. So we've had 3 opportunities for public input, being the study session, this public hearing, and we always take written input as well on any LUCA. There are 3 decision criteria in the land use code that the amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan. We do believe it is, specifically comprehensive plan policy N-4, which is to plan and prepare for the response, recovery, and mitigation of potential disasters and hazards. We're going to press on this again. This LUCA allows continuity of services and safety facilities throughout an emergency circumstance. We do think that meets that criteria, that this amendment will enhance the public health, safety, and welfare. We're allowing for more flexibility with temporary public safety facilities, enhancing that safety and welfare of the citizens of Bellevue. And the amendment is not contrary to the best interests of the citizens and property owners of the city of Bellevue. As I discussed, there are some sideboards, some conditioning allowances to make sure that any temporary public safety facilities will be compatible with neighborhoods, and protecting the citizens of Bellevue in an emergency circumstance is obviously important to those citizens. So we do find this LUCA compatible with these criteria. And again, the recommended action is to hold the public hearing on ordinance number 6676 and considering adopting the ordinance. And with that, Mayor, I will send it back to you.
Okay, great. Great presentation. So this provides a smooth transition for the congregations for the homeless to move from their temporary shelter to their permanent shelter without interruption of services, right? Okay.
Yes.
Any comments or questions? If not, we'll, excuse me, move on to the public hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have anybody registered for a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. No, we do not have any pre-registered speakers. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone joining us in council chambers or anyone joining us virtually that would like to make comment to the council. Please raise your hand. Okay, I see Miss Betsy Hummer in the audience.
Okay, I'm Betsy Hummer, 14541 Southeast 26th Street. Well, thanks for this public hearing on, they say those words so quickly, temporary public safety facilities. So it's wonderful to have the brand new shelter going in at Eastgate. I get to see it most every day, traveling on I-90, and it's really coming along. And I am just so impressed with how we were able to, the whole city was able to step up to the plate and provide the Lincoln Center facility for the men experiencing homelessness. And of course, great kudos to former council member Kevin Wallace for his efforts in that affair. So I will hope that while it all sounds really great, I really hope that you take a second look at some restrictions and not just put all the faith and trust of the city of Bellevue in, of course, I admire the city manager and the development services director, but I really think that we need to look to the future and not just take it as one little, this one particular instance, because this land use code amendment will have an impact on any other shelters or any other similar facilities going forward. So I think instead of just, I think some restrictions would be in order. I haven't studied it completely to give you my ideas on what those might be. But I think just moving forward, also, I believe the most important part of the success of the men's shelter going forward is our homeless services uses land use code 20.20.455. And what Congregations for the Homeless has repeatedly said is that the Good Neighbor Agreement was the most impactful and important part of putting that entire shelter together. And I really believe that the Good Neighbor Agreement should be included in anything going forward with these temporary services and anything to do with the vulnerable population that are the homeless among us. Similar to the child care land use code amendment that we're considering as well. Those are our vulnerable populations, and we, and especially the City Council, really needs to pay attention to how we are protecting them and how we are accountable for them. So thanks again for your great service, and I must say that public outreach via Nextdoor, I think is really wonderful, and on your Facebook pages. And also I've been recommending the My Bellevue app. Not every city has it. Kirkland doesn't have it, so when I gave them great suggestions to use it for it, so thanks for the great public outreach, and please consider some restrictions. Thanks.
Thank you. I will do one additional call out for comments. If you would like to make a comment during this public hearing, please raise your hand. *9 if you're connected with a phone. Okay, Mayor, I see no additional hands.
Thank you. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any further comments or questions? Not seeing any, is there a motion?
I move to adopt Ordinance 6676, amending Section 20.20.850 of the City of Bellevue Land Use Code to provide additional extension periods for temporary public safety facilities during a declared natural disaster or emergency circumstance.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have something that's going to just help us conform with state law. So this is another easy one. Go ahead.
Council members, you're absolutely right. It is a proposed land use code amendment to conform provisions to allow more than 12 children in a family child care home. And as you mentioned, it is to be consistent with state law that was recently passed. Joining us this evening again is Nick Whipple, our Code and Policy Planning Manager, along with Caleb Miller, Senior Planner, both from Development Services, to provide a brief staff report.
Great, thank you, and good evening again. So tonight we are here to hold a public hearing on the Family Child Care Home Land Use Code Amendment, or LUCA. We have prepared the ordinance for adoption if the council chooses tonight. And this item was at study session on September 6th, at which point it was directed to schedule the public hearing for this evening. So the recommended action is to hold the public hearing on Ordinance 6677, and then following the public hearing, consider adopting this ordinance. And for our agenda this evening, we've got a bit of background on family child care homes, including how they are regulated under the Land Use Code today and what the changes in state law would do in terms of our Land Use Code. And then we'll also provide some objectives for the LUCA, the components, talk through the process that got us to tonight, and then close with the ask of council. So with that, I will turn this over to Caleb Miller.
Great, thank you, Nick, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. So this LUCA responds specifically to Senate Bill 5237, which was adopted in 2021. The bill included many different provisions related to child care that were intended to both expand access and capacity in general, but also address an acute need that was caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, Section 313 of this bill directed the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, to establish a waiver program to increase capacity for home-based childcare to more than 12 children. DCYF then followed by establishing these rules in early 2022. As part of these rules, they laid out the process for approving the waiver as well as a set of criteria. These criteria include the provider experience and their licensing history with DCYF, the floor area of their home, the number of working toilets, and staff-to-child ratios and age group limits. Under the Land Use Code, home-based daycares are defined as a family child care home under 2050.020. This includes a specific reference to a maximum of 12 children in order to qualify as this land use. And then it also limits the duration of child care to no more than 24 hours in these uses. These are permitted land uses in residential districts, so no land use approval is needed to site them. They can just move into a home, unless, of course, any building permit is needed for some building improvements that might be needed. However, the DCYF is the licensing authority and ultimately determines the maximum capacity on a case-by-case basis, depending on the criteria I discussed earlier. So in terms of the objectives of this LUCA, it really is intended to remove the conflict between the land use code and the state definitions. To respond to a question from the last meeting, we were asked whether the city had a role in DCYF licensing. We do not. So to improve the ease and clarity of administration for family child care homes, it's best to have no conflict between the local and state definitions of these uses. This will also improve predictability for applicants and clean up the outdated references to state agencies and legislation that were in the code at this time. Specifically, the LUCA is also meant to comply with GMA requirements. Specifically, the city cannot impose additional requirements for these family child care home uses beyond what we can impose for single family homes. So we can't go above and beyond what any other house in the neighborhood is already allowed to do. So to get into the specifics, this LUCA will amend the definition of family child care homes in 2050-020. This will insert a direct reference to state legislation detailing the waiver program from DCYF. It does still refer to the main existing language of 12 children, but then just authorizes others to go through that waiver program if DCYF allows it. This also removes a 24-hour time limit for childcare, as that is also regulated by DCYF, so removes any sort of potential conflict with the licensing and land use code provisions. Additionally, as I noted, the LUCA will also revise the family child care home requirements in LUC 2021-70, just to clean up specific outdated references that are no longer valid. And finally, I'll just note that all other related child care standards and for both larger facilities and family child care homes will remain the same following adoption. In terms of LUCA process and public outreach, there are two modes of outreach. First are the process for requirements for typical for LUCAs. So this would be the notices of application as well as the public hearing that is being held tonight. The notice of application and public hearing was a combined notice that was issued on September 8th in the weekly permit bulletin and then on September 12th in the Seattle Times. Additionally, a city webpage was also created for the public to track LUCA progression and get information to provide comments and more information on the state legislation. And finally, for the staff recommendation, we will respond to each of these LUCA criteria as noted in the code. The first is whether the LUCA is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does contain several references to expansion of childcare in Bellevue. Specifically, policy HS16 discusses this exact strategy. So we believe that by expanding the capacity for childcare, this LUCA is consistent with the comp plan. The next is whether it enhances public health, safety, or welfare. Again, by increasing the capacity of childcare in Bellevue, this does provide for lower cost and more opportunities for childcare. The waiver program also from DCYF also is adequate to ensure that there are facilities needed to support more than 12 children in these family childcare homes. And then similarly, this LUCA is not contrary to the interests of citizens, property owners, and so on, as again, DCYF does have guardrails in place to make sure that they're safe places where children can learn and grow. And so with that, we are seeking council action to hold the public hearing on ordinance number 6677, and following that, consider adoption of the ordinance. And I'll pass it back to the mayor.
Great, thank you for the presentation. So any comments or questions from council on this? Okay, not seeing any. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for comment?
Thank you, Mayor. There are no pre-registered speakers for this public hearing. At this point, I would ask if there's anyone joining us in council chambers or anyone online joining us that wants to make comment. Please raise your hand. Star 9 if you're connected with a phone. I do not see any hands.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Assuming there's no further comments or questions from the council, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
I move to adopt ordinance 6677, amending chapters 20.20 and 20.50 of the City of Bellevue Land Use Code to conform family child care home provisions to allow more than 12 children as authorized by the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families and pursuant to RCW 43.216.692 and WAC 110-300-0358.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Terrific. Okay, we have 3 study session items tonight. I'd like to take the first one and take a break after that. So, Mr. Miyake, could you please introduce the first one?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The first topic on your study session agenda tonight is the monthly regional issues report. Joining us this evening is Genesee Atkins, Chief of External Affairs, as well as Lacey Jane Wolf, Assistant Director of Intergovernmental Relations. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Genesee.
Terrific. Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Hello, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. We have, for just this evening, really a written-only presentation. You have all the reports from all of our regional committees with up-to-the-date minutes of what's just transpired and what's ahead. The one thing we wanted to call out in front of you this evening is the timeline we have in developing our next draft state legislative agenda. This, of course, will be kind of our guiding document and principles as we go into the next state legislative session, which is set to start the second Monday of January. And so we just wanted to give you a little bit of a status update because we'll be coming back to you later on in the fall. Right now, we are currently about halfway through meeting with city departments and leadership in the agencies. We're going to fold all that together into a really good draft that then we're going to sit down and meet with each one of you individually on. So we'll gather the input from you each individually, then really synthesize that together, and then come bring it to you in November for your consideration and final adoption. This will give us plenty of time, a couple of good months in advance of session to work with our state legislators in the 41st and the 48th, as well as other very important stakeholders and associates in the community. So we just wanted to give you a little preview of what's coming up around the corner. We appreciate everybody's engagement through AWC, through Sound Cities, and through other organizations to help us get it into good shape so that we'll be really strategic and effective next year. Happy to field any questions you might have for Lacey, Jane, or I.
Great. So it sounds like you're going to give us a chance to meet with you one-on-one to discuss and give feedback, and before you bring a draft back to us, so then we can discuss further.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're aiming for, we know you have your hands full with the budget right now, so we're looking at the second half of October to get your attention for those briefings.
Great. Okay. Any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Zahn.
I just had a quick question. So I'm excited for this schedule. It makes sense. When we say mid-November, does that mean that it'll be adopted before because they normally have their November kind of committee days?
The assembly days, are usually, they move around a little bit. Typically, they're either right before Thanksgiving or maybe in very early December. More recently, they've been tending to just do it in early December, usually that first full week of December. So it would certainly be several weeks in advance of that.
Okay, and then my second question is, this talks about the state ledge, but we also have our federal legislative agenda as well. So what's the timing for that one in comparison?
That's an excellent question. So technically, I was reminded, because we've been talking a lot about federal issues, and I know given your work on NLC, you're very tuned into what's going on there. Technically, the agenda that you adopted in April of this year is a 2-year agenda, but because we're going to be getting a new Congress, we're going to update it in spring of next year anyway. This is something, the timing of that is something I've talked through a little bit extensively with our consultants. What we're thinking about right now is getting something, again, in kind of a kind of squishy shape in January, and then waiting, frankly, to see what the president's budget proposal says so that we can make sure that we really put a fine point on our priorities so that they're in line with whatever he may kind of prioritize, perhaps for competitive funding grants. And so that usually happens in the first or second week of February. So we would be coming to adopt a refreshed federal agenda probably in February, maybe early March. But we talked at some length about how to really hit the bullseye exactly right, and their sense about the right time would be to do it just on the heels of the president's budget rollout.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Do I understand that we're not going to discuss this? We're just going to one-on-one?
Well, no, we can discuss whatever you want right now. I'm just saying that in addition to tonight's presentation, that we have a lot in writing and a little in speaking, we are going to be doing one-on-ones as well.
Thank you. I have a chance to read some of the details. One is the federal legislative update. I think Councilmember Zahn suggested we do have a very important role and also information and input from National League of Cities based on our participation. And so I feel that need to be somehow reflected because it is an ongoing process. When I went to the NLC Leadership Conference in Atlanta, they discussed extensively on the bipartisan infrastructure law, and they really are reaching out to the cities as to how to even to describe the process and the criteria, because they want to get input from the cities so that they know how to structure their agenda, legislative criteria. And then this ongoing process of they continue to talk to the cities who can talk to the federal government, whether it's with DOT or Human Services or whichever agency are working on those specific projects and agendas, even including technical assistance. So I think there's a broad range of ways that they can help city to be positioned to get money. So I think we need to plug in, because if we miss the beginning of it, if we don't have the assistance, we are at a disadvantage. We are working on our own. And if we do not have that, then we'll be even get further behind, because they already have talked to the cities that are on board, that are working with them. So I think it's important that we recognize that, and there's a role for us that participate in National League of Cities to make sure that we make the connection. In fact, I believe I've referred some of that information to you, our staff. So I just want to be sure that we are continuing. We have a two-way street working with the NLC, number one, and two, with various agencies, departments from federal government, so that we can know what's happening, so we can be plugged in. Because if we don't do that, when we get to November, December, February, it may be too late. Somebody's had a leg up for us. It's very competitive. It could be. But at the same time, if we're there early, it may not be as competitive, because you have a leg up. So I just wanted to mention that. Perhaps we can talk about that in more detail as to what our role can be to take advantage of some of those things. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be back at 15 after. Okay, we're on to the exciting part here. So, Mr. Miyake, I know you've worked really, really hard with staff to come up with something to present to us tonight, and we are anxious to hear. So would you please introduce it?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This topic in front of you this evening is the 23-24 operating budget and 7-year capital plan. It is my pleasure to produce this, to present to you the proposed budget beginning this evening. I wanted to make a few opening remarks before I turn it over to both Tony and to Evan. First and foremost, I wanted to just let the council know how complex this budget is and how difficult it was to put together. I can't tell you how many hours that the leadership team and I probably lost in sleep over toiling over how to put this budget together. But I think in front of you, you have a really good product. I want to say, in terms of the difficulty, in my 20 years plus with the city, in terms of the budget, many of you know that I cut my teeth on the budget here, so I know how difficult it is to balance. And gosh, my hat and kudos to Tony and her staff on putting this and making this happen. This particular budget is the most complex that I've worked on in my 20 years because there's so many factors that affect the budget. I mean, that made it very complicated, starting with just the unprecedented growth in the city, super high inflation and rising interest rates, a structural financial deficit, the threat of a recession, and uncertainty coming on us all because of us coming out as we come out of the pandemic. Having said all that, we are very fortunate. The city is in great shape. It is the city where everyone wants to be right now, right? You know that from the news, and you hear it a lot from your colleagues. Our residents and businesses have super trust in the city. We have very high residential and business ratings that probably the highest we've ever had coming into this budget. But, there are clouds on the horizon and opportunities for us to take advantage of. And this budget responds to both of those by way of just very super strong policy direction and priority setting by the council. Thank you very much. That has been very helpful for us as the staff on putting this budget together. We have had great feedback from both our residential and business communities. We got quite a bit of feedback on our surveys that we do every year, as well as from a number of our stakeholders outside. And the proposed revenue enhancements that are in front of you in this budget that are needed to start correcting the structural budget deficit we've had. All these have helped guide the development of this budget that's in front of you this evening. And I am truly indebted to the residences, the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, the Bellevue Downtown Association, community leaders for their active engagement, and to the council again for your thoughtful leadership on policy development, priority setting. And in particular, the leadership team, all of them are here this evening, for taking off their department hats in putting this budget together and stepping up as true leaders of the city. And as a result, what you have in front of you this evening, I always say this, is the sum of, it's the product which is greater than the sum of the parts. So I want to thank the staff for delivering just such a great, I also want to thank the staff of the city for just delivering great service to the community and for their dedication and patience during this unprecedented growth that we've encountered in the city. I have added staff to this budget so that we can ensure that we continue delivering exceptional public service, which has become the hallmark of this city and which our community has come to expect. So we really truly look forward to the ongoing conversations with the council in the coming weeks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony and to Evan.
Thank you, Senator Miyake. It's a pleasure to be back in front of you this evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Thank you once again for having us. And before I move on, I think he gave a lot of thoughts and thank yous to a whole lot of people. He neglected to thank himself, which might be a little odd, but he has been a phenomenal leader through a very complicated budget that's being presented to you this evening, and I am eternally grateful for his leadership, so thank you. This is the first of several budget discussions and presentations we'll have on the city's budget as we move forward. Just as a note of reference, we did post the large, very many-page budget document on the city's website this afternoon, and if you do go out there and hit budget in the search engine, it will pop up, and if someone has a problem with that in the public, please give us a ring. We're happy to help solve whatever that looks like. So thank you again for your patience as we got the large budget document out there. This is information only this evening. We have several more meetings with you scheduled ahead of us. Our agenda for this evening is we will spend a little bit of time on some administrative items, calendar, actions for final adoption. I'll take a little bit of time, talk about the public involvement and some of the key operating investments that this budget does to continue to move the city forward. I'm then going to turn the presentation over to Evan, who will handle the budget overview, the general fund forecast, and the capital investment program. And then I'll pick it up at the end, reminding you all where we're headed for the next few weeks. So with that, I will move us forward. Here is our budget milestone calendar. As you can see, starting on the far left-hand side, the budget workshop started back on March 7th. We've had 2 public hearings in advance of the city manager's preliminary budget tonight. As you have heard, City Manager Miyake is presenting his preliminary budget. We have 3 council meetings ahead of us, October 3rd, 10th, and 24th, and I have a slide in about 3 or 4 down from here that will go over the agendas for those. So you won't see that right next, but you'll see it in a bit. November 7th, we have our final public hearing on the budget. We've reserved time on November 14th for follow-up, additional questions, eventual directions, so we can bring back a tentative adoption package to you on November 21st. As always, when we do a budget process, there's many questions that many have, so we will once again establish a memory bank that we will try to get turned around for each of your council meetings. We'll take the questions you bring here this evening, as well as anything you send to us via email to put in that memory bank so that we're all engaged in all those questions and answers. I'm not going to go through all the list of council actions. We'll get that farther along in a couple more weeks, but there's quite a large sum of them in order for us to adopt the complicated budget that's in front of you. And with that, let me take just a minute, and I have 2 more slides to talk a little bit about the public involvement that we heard. As you know, we have surveys that are conducted over the last year that show residents and businesses find that Bellevue is a good to excellent place to live. In fact, 97% of them in the budget survey said that Bellevue is a good and excellent place to live. We also ask in those surveys, what are the biggest problems? What are the largest issues facing Bellevue? And we routinely hear, order irrelevant, but we routinely hear in the top several, affordability and cost of living, public safety, and homelessness remain large concerns. We've also had 2 public hearings in May and August that you were both all here to participate in. And additionally, we've done additional outreach efforts with businesses and key stakeholders as we have been developing this budget. The budget before you responds to these concerns as well as all of your council priorities. And with that, up there it goes. I call this the pinwheel chart because it reminds me of something that my kids used to have when they were little. It shows the operating budget and how it responds to the concerns we've heard from the public as well as council priorities. I'll start at the top with growth and urbanization, and I'll work clockwise around the piece. And on the next slide after this, we'll talk about the next couple of meetings and how this pinwheel chart will come into play in those meetings. So, first of all, growth and urbanization. This budget will appropriate to the remaining $12 million of the American Rescue Act. As you may remember, the city received a total of $20 million. $8 million was appropriated back in 2021 for rental assistance and small business. We'll continue with those themes, and $10 million of the remaining $12 million will go to critical human services needs and $2 million to small business relief. The budget also responds to a safe, clean, and vibrant city with a pilot in 2023 and then ongoing programming in 2024 and beyond. And it increases development services inspections and review for greater customer service. That will come forward in the development services work that will come later in several study sessions. Regarding homelessness, we preserve our existing funding, and we're adding a safe parking program, as well as additional homeless and outreach support. We're going to continue to invest in programs that advance equity, inclusion, and access by implementing the apprenticeship program, as well as enhancing our existing procurement WIMBY, or Minority Women Disadvantaged Business Program. We will invest $250,000 annually ongoing in cross-cultural programming in response to the direction that Council gave a few months ago in the Cross-Cultural Center. Additionally, we will expand the overall city diversity work with ongoing funding to continue to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion citywide. Moving towards the bottom, we go to environmental stewardship. The budget before you will advance environmental stewardship in a couple of ways. The operating budget has $500,000 of ongoing funding in it, and then the capital budget, which is not represented on this screen but will come later in tonight's presentation, has additional funding in it. It has $1.8 million of additional environmental stewardship initiative work in addition to environmental EV infrastructure, EV infrastructure for all city facilities, as well as building efficiency programs for city facilities. So both of those items are included in this capital program as well. Regarding affordable housing, in addition to the existing revenue streams of 1590 and 1406 and the ones that you know quite well, we are investing some one-time money to help accelerate the next right work by removing barriers to creating housing options. And finally, towards the 11 o'clock area of public safety, one of the areas of concern that we've repeatedly heard from our public and businesses, this budget not only maintains funding levels for critical fire and police that we currently have, it also invests in a community crisis assistance team, additional policing for growth, equipping Fire Station 10 for opening, and then also body-worn cameras, which the council has also previously given as a head nod towards. So with that, as kind of the overview of what all the key investments and the complicated work we've done to bring this budget forward. The next 3 October study sessions, so the 3 before the public hearing, we'll look at the following areas. So on October 3rd, we'll look at ARPA, public safety, homelessness, and safe, clean, vibrant city. On October 10th, Director O'Tall will be here to speak to utility rates, and then we'll have other areas as requested. So we've given ourselves a little bit of buffer if there's something that we've forgotten or an interest that the council has to make sure we have space for that. Then on October 24th, we'll hit development services rates, Human Services Commission and the CBDG block grants, as well as the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and then the equity, diversity, and access part of the pinwheel. So with that as the overview of the investments and the quantity of investments we've placed in the budget, I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Evan Phillips to take us through the rest of the budget work. Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Tony. So the 2023-2024 preliminary budget before you today is $2.2 billion, and it is split across 5 broad categories, and this slide is useful for those of you who may not be familiar with government budgeting, but in short, we can't commingle a variety of different sources of funds. So what is in front of you tonight are the 5 buckets of funding and how they are broken out. So I'll take a moment to be walking us through all 5 categories, starting with the far right with capital investment funds, and slowly moving our way to the left towards the general fund. So the capital funds, which primarily fund major public facility improvements, including our parks, our fire stations, sewer and water pipes, sidewalks, roadway improvements, among a whole host of other things involved in our CIP. This $679 million figure reflects the first 2 years of our CIP and includes $426 million for utilities funding, as well as that includes their reserves, as well as $253 million in the general CIP, and again, that number includes the reserve amount as well. Moving over to our left, we have the special purpose funds funded at $139 million for the biennium, and some of the resources that we receive as a city have to be separated based on their funding source. So sometimes that is restricted by either state law or by a donor's request, or for a specific purpose like grant donations, our hotel motel tax, park voter approved maintenance, among others. Much of this spending also has has to be isolated for accounting purposes. So think our debt service portfolio has to be separated out, as well as select human services. Moving left to our enterprise funds that are funded again, and these are all biennium numbers at $568 million. These reflect our city services, our city lines of business that are run like a private enterprise. So think your development services, your parks enterprise, the marina, and the utilities funds. Obviously, as Tony mentioned, both the development services and utilities funds will be brought forward in their rates conversations later on as part of our budget deliberations. Moving left one more time is the internal service and other operating funds. Several areas in the city provide goods and services to city departments on a cost reimburses basis for usage of service, including facility and equipment repair and maintenance, liability claims, employee medical expenses, and technology charges. And finally, everyone's favorite, the general fund, supports most direct services out to the community, including police, fire, parks, transportation, community development, as well as a myriad of administrative functions like human resources, city management, finance, customer service, among others. So when we speak about the operating budget of the city, we are talking about those left 3 buckets. So we're talking about the general fund, the internal service and other operating funds, and the enterprise funds. So how is this city funded? So that $2.2 billion number for total resources for 23-24, of that amount, $630 million, or 28% of that is taxes. And you can see the percentages there as well, going counterclockwise across the pie chart in the black and gray segments. Obviously, there are some components of this, as I mentioned, that do have to be separated out. So a good example of that would be our utility services fees. So utility service fees only could be spent on utility services purposes. We couldn't go buy a fire truck with utility rates. So your water bill is safe being spent on water-related expenditures. Okay. All right. So building off of the 2021-2022 budget, the 23-24 preliminary budget maintains the cost containment measures adopted to weather the economic impacts of COVID-19. While these ongoing measures help the city's long-term revenue and expenditure in balance, it does not do enough to fully offset the needs and services for a growing and urbanizing city. To fund these critical needs, this budget proposes modest adjustments to tax revenues. The first of these adjustments are in the property taxes. A 2% property tax adjustment for 2023, 1% of that being councilmanic and 1% being of banked capacity for substantial needs of the city, and an additional 1% councilmanic tax in 2024. Additionally, we are proposing adjusting the business and occupation tax in this proposed budget, increasing the taxable gross receipts rate from 0.1496% on taxable gross receipts to 0.1596%. This proposed budget also adjusts the land use permit recovery to 100% from 50%, and more information will be provided on this last part on October 24th when Development Services provides their presentation. I do want to take a moment over the next few slides to take a deeper dive into the property taxes and the business and occupation taxes, the B&O taxes that are included as part of this preliminary budget. So on the screen before you is the 2022 property tax distribution. So this is a good example of the distribution of a property tax bill for the average Bellevue property owner. As you can see, the city of Bellevue makes up 10% of that total tax bill, and this budget proposes an increase, again, of 2%, 1% bank capacity, and 1% councilmanic adjustment in 2023, and a 1% councilmanic adjustment in 2022. That 2023 adjustment would increase a $1 million property owner's tax bill by $18 annually. And similarly, in 2024, that would be a $9 adjustment annually based on the preliminary budget before you. Notably, any change made in this budget will only adjust the 10% portion of the Bellevue property owner's tax bill. And the last time, just for reference, last time the council adjusted, or rather used the bank capacity, was in 2015. Diving in a little bit more on the B&O adjustment, this budget does include a 0.01% increase in business and occupation taxes based on the company's taxable gross receipts that reside within Bellevue. Of course, small businesses that are grossing less than $180,000 do not currently pay taxes within the B&O tax structures that we have in the city of Bellevue, and that would remain the same in this 23-24 budget. As you can see from the table, a 0.01% increase would increase companies' tax bills as noted. So for a small business grossing in the neighborhood of $250,000 within the city of Bellevue, that would equate to a $25 adjustment in 2023. For a large multinational corporation grossing around $1 billion, that would be a $100,000 impact in 2023. And these B&O rates, as proposed, would be effective January 1st on 2023. There are a few other rates that council will adopt as part of this budget. Obviously, Tony briefly went through the list of adoption actions earlier on in the presentation. That includes utilities rates, which will be coming forward in front of you all on October 10th, and development services rates, which we have a tentative date for October 24th there as well. And there is no change to the fire inspection fee for this biennium. So I do want to take a moment to dive a little bit deeper specifically into the general fund and talk about sustainability. And I do want to take a moment to talk about the long-term structural deficit due to the revenue imbalance that we have, coupled with the long-term investments that we need to make in the city. Everything on that pinwheel is something that we need to address: growth and urbanization in the city, and we have made adjustments to make that possible. So one of the things that we did prior to 2023 is intentionally build reserves across the city. This council also regularly adjusted the 1% councilmanic property tax. In 2019, the city council implemented fire inspection fees. And as part of the 21-22 COVID budget, the budget included $8 million approximately of ongoing reductions for cost containment measures. So all of these help make the city a much more fiscally sustainable, and the 2023 budget continues that with these additional revenue adjustments that we went over this evening. So the B&O and the property tax adjustments are part of helping that long-term fiscal sustainability, but unfortunately in the long term, as long as Washington state property tax structures remain limiting our growth to 1% or less than inflation, we will continue to have a long-term structural debt revenue problem. So one of everyone's favorite slides is the general fund forecast. So due to the uncertain times that we have, and talking with our economic experts and our own staff, there's really unclear what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. We do expect some type of recession to be on the horizon, but we don't know the severity or how deep or the timing of that. So for this 23-24 budget process, we provided you with 2 forecast scenarios: an optimistic forecast and a pessimistic forecast in terms of revenue. The optimistic forecast assumes that we'll have continued growth in the city of Bellevue and a robust development cycle. The pessimistic revenue picture or scenario assumes a deeper recession and As you can see in the more optimistic scenario for 25-26, and just to orient you here a little bit, the blue line is our expenditures, the optimistic is our green line with triangles, and our pessimistic is the orange line with the squares. For that green line with the triangles in our optimistic scenario, you'll see that there is a very little gap in years 2025 and 2026. These are very manageable deficits, and that's a testament to all the good work that this council and the city manager has done over the last biennium. And it is entirely possible that in our optimistic scenario that if the economy is more robust than we anticipate it to be, that can close that gap. On the other hand, with the potential recession on the horizon, the pessimistic revenue forecast assumes a much larger gap and a more persistent problem. And we'll watch that closely over the next months and years and keep you all abreast of any changes. Undergirding these forecasts are several key risks, and there's 4 primary ones that I'd like to mention here tonight. The risk of recession is really the paramount one for us. We don't know when the recession will hit, what severity, and how it will impact the Puget Sound region in particular. There's also worldwide events such as the war in Ukraine, and there are extreme weather cycles that could further disrupt the supply chain. Also, as we move into the more endemic phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's possible that more variants could emerge and evade our current public health measures, so that's a concern for us as well as the impacts of remote and hybrid work environments on how consumers spend their money in Bellevue and elsewhere, and how employers operate as a result. Now I want to switch gears and talk about the capital budget. Specifically here tonight, while the CIP does include the general CIP as well as the utility CIP listed both here, the utility CIP will be left for October 10th, and tonight we will be just talking about the general CIP. Again, that's $245 million for the biennium and $808 million over the 7-year CIP period. Over the next 2 slides, I do want to talk about some notable things that the CIP invests in, but I won't be hitting every single point here. I do want to mention that, as always, our CIP makes sure that we pay our debt obligations. That is paramount. We always have to make sure we pay our bills. Also, we do make sure that we pay for ongoing maintenance, specifically city infrastructure. That includes our overlay project and parks refurbishment. And we have, as Tony mentioned earlier, are making investments in the environmental stewardship, or ESI, with the city charging infrastructure as well as building retrofits or energy efficiency projects. Also important to note, there is architecture and engineering for a potential aquatic center as well. Continuing on to our next slide, I do also want to highlight a few other points. There are some notable comprehensive planning here, including Wilbert and growth, notable transportation projects in our neighborhood enhancement program, our NEP and congestion management projects. We are continuing the levee work that we have on fire, parks, and transportation levees, including building and then later equipping Fire Station 10, and various roadway improvements and multimodal improvements for Vision Zero. And of course, because government does need to invest in itself to grow and maintain the services that we have, we are building a Parks Resource Center. We are going to be funding a replacement of our financial system, as well as replacing fuel tanks at various city sites throughout the city. And again, I won't list all of these projects before you, but I do want to take a moment to highlight a few. These are the new investments and new projects within the CIP, and these are specifically in our city neighborhoods. And I do think it's really important that we have a whole host of transportation and parks investment, including some seed money for new parks in underserved areas like Eastgate and Factoria. I think those are worth mentioning. But there is a whole host of transportation and parks projects that are going to be net new investments into our neighborhoods. There are also, as part of the 7-year CIP, the 23 through 29 CIP, additional investments in growth in the amount of $19 million in infrastructure, $9 million. Again, there's the aquatic facility, the architecture and engineering of $4 million. We also have notable investments for some parks facilities, $1 million for off-leash facilities, parks, trails, shoreline restoration, as well as the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trail. There is also, again, the ESI projects for electric vehicle infrastructure and the ESI energy efficiency projects for building retrofits. I do want to take a step back to look at the entire CIP holistically. So the pie chart in front of you this evening I do want to walk through all the different categories that we have. So first and foremost is, again, our debt service at $178 million, or 22%. One thing I do want to highlight as a story in terms of cost containment that we've done here is, as part of the last biennium, we did refinance a lot of the debt and save the city a whole host of money in the process. So this is a lower number, and we were able to take advantage of the advantageous low interest rates just in the nick of time. So that's a significant win for the city that I'd be bereft if I didn't highlight. The next category that we have, because Bellevue has this as a best practice and our current practice, that we don't build anything new before maintaining what we currently have. So ongoing maintenance is a huge priority in the second call on our allocation of resources, and that's at 20%, or $161 million. We also have our 3 levies, our parks, transportation, and fire levies, and that accounts for $150 million, or 19%. And then we have our largest trunk, our discrete and ongoing projects, including the new projects that I mentioned on the last 2 slides. So those new investments to our neighborhoods and growth and infrastructure, those are found in this discrete and new projects category. Diving into our ongoing maintenance, about half the pie is considered transportation, and that includes the overlay pavement project, among others. Another 35% or so is for parks, and that includes parks refurbishments. I do want to move on to our discrete and new projects, of which, again, half of that is transportation funding, and that includes significant projects in the Bell-Red Street Grid, as well as West Lake Sammamish Phase 4, among many others. There's also a substantial chunk for community development, which includes arts and culture funding, as well as implementation support for ESI and economic development plans. And finally, our levies, which again are 19%, and this is our current voted levies. And has a whole host of variety of projects. Our parks levy is continuing to complete the airfield park. The fire levy is first focusing on Fire Station 10 construction, and the transportation levy is working on a whole host of neighborhood and congestion projects. And as a reminder, our current parks levy expires in 2028, and our fire and transportation levies expire in 2036. And with that, Mayor, I will hand the presentation back to Tony Call.
I think I will just finish this up, and thank you very much, Evan, for the good work. I will just finish this up and remind you what's coming in front of you in the next 3 sessions, so October 3rd, October 10th, and October 24th. And then finally, an overall look at our calendar that says we are heading towards a public hearing on November 7th, final council discussion on the 14th, and tentative adoption on the 21st. And with that, that is our presentation for you this evening. Thank you for taking the time to listen and presenting the city manager's preliminary budget. Over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. That's a great presentation. I just want to thank you all that are here, and even who are not here tonight, for all the hard work that you've done on this. This is such an important part of our city's success. You've devoted more months on this. I know you worked all summer while we were on break. And I just want to add that we're so fortunate to have a city manager that has such a strong background in budgeting. You bring that to the table, and we all benefit from that. So thank you so much. So, comments or questions? Why don't we just, I know everybody's going to want to talk, so why don't we start with Councilmember Stokes?
Actually, I don't have a lot to say at this point. I think it's just been an amazing thing putting together. It's a lot of pieces moving here and there and how they all fit in, and it's complex, and you see park things popping up 5-6 times on things, and that's a real skill in how to make those fit and look at the different pieces. It's you just don't fund streets, you don't fund parks, you don't fund these things by themselves. They're all integrated, and I think it's just an amazing piece putting it together, and it puts us on what I like is it puts us on a solid track going forward. It's going to be difficult, and we've gone through a lot of difficult things in the last 10, 15 years, and we're in a period that we've experienced a lot of great things in the past, but never anything like this, as you said. And I think what we're having presented here is a budget and a plan for action that will take us forward. And it has a lot of room. We have a lot of planning on, which sometimes you get budgets, and this is the budget, and you don't present the idea that something may happen and we have to work on that. So we're ready for that as well. So I feel very confident that we're going to move forward on this. And there's a lot of we have a lot of things tied down, but there are a lot of things that are in categories, so it gives us a lot of possibilities as things move along, as we can be proactive and work on this and work with the community. And one of the greatest things about this is so much of this, all of it, is really very much grounded in working with the community over the last several years, particularly, and you know, we're a lot of excitement. We just had a very, very good meeting out in East, what I'm trying to say, the community center, and about the park, you know, in the Eastgate Park, and it was really exciting to see the people so really powerfully talking about how can we do these things, from pickleball to swimming to an aquatic center. And I think that just shows that the community is ready to go forward, and it's our job to make sure that they go forward in a way that's successful. And having the staff doing the job they've done, and this council is going to work on this very hard, and I think we'll come out in a good way. I don't, you know, want to take time to ask questions on this right now. I want to go over it really well, and we have the specific pieces going forward. But you know, when you get Airfield Park put together with all that, it's going to be great, and it's just an example of what we're doing in other places. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Stokes. I'm so proud of the work that's been done. This budget, at least at first blush, we don't know all the details, but it takes into account council priorities. There are things in here that we've been talking about, all of us. It takes into account the public's priorities, and it looks like it creates a really fair and nice balance, keeping in mind, as I do, that my goal is always to make sure that Bellevue remains a very safe, livable, thriving community. And from the initial presentation, it looks like we're doing that really well. The other thing I like about balance is the projects. We've heard from folks that get very worried that we spend so much money building out the commercial areas as we need to provide the growth, that we don't give enough love to our neighborhoods. And we always, I mean, with the neighborhood enhancement project, we always try to give love to our neighborhoods. This capital budget gives a lot of love to our neighborhoods. I mean, there's things on here that I'm just so excited to see move forward. Not to mention the aquatic center. Thank you for that. You know, I didn't realize that the wearing the blue, which is the color of the aquatic center, was going to be so on point tonight. But so yeah, I'm really excited about that. I also wanted to give props for the presentation tonight. I was thinking about it. This is my 7th biennial budget presentation. 7, yeah, the 7th one. And I've never seen a PowerPoint that so clearly described to the public and the council how we fund things, what the different buckets are. I mean, well done. I mean, super, super clear. I hope this goes also on the budget page, because I think this is a really excellent visual of what we do and how we're doing it and what's proposed. I have a couple of questions which don't have to be answered tonight, but I just wanted to share them as I like to give you guys, to let you know what I'm going to be asking when the night in question. So the structural deficit on slide 17, we've been grappling with this all along and trying to make sure that we shepherd the resources really wisely to eliminate the structural deficit. Does the structural deficit lines that are shown on that slide take into account the revenue sources that we're considering adding to this budget? They do. Okay, so that's with the additional revenue. So we're still going to need to keep working on this year after year. Okay, and then on the clean component of the budget, is the Adopt a Street in the budget?
It's included in the clean, safe, vibrant city line of the budget.
Great. I was hoping it sounded like it would go there, but I just wasn't sure.
Yes.
And then on the utility rates, I know that we have some pretty big increases coming from King County that we have to then pass through to our customers on sewer, and we have some pretty big increases coming from Cascade Water Alliance that we have to pass through to our water customers, and of course they all get combined bills. So I would like to know, when we have the utility presentation, how much of the increase is due to, you know, other people's pass through versus actual increases in expenses that are the Bellevue-controlled specific expenses. I think that would be helpful. I'd like to know, and I also think our public would like to know when they look at our utility rates. So, yeah, I agree with the mayor. We're very blessed to have such a strong finance team led by the city manager and by yourself, Ms. Call, and your deputy. I think this is going to be a good process, and I'm looking forward to getting into the details as we move through it. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, boy, we're gonna make them look very good tonight. You're gonna get bored of hearing some of these things, but I want to say thank you to not only our city manager, Brad Miyake, but Tony Call and Evan. Thank you so much for working. Thank you for all the department heads that are here tonight as well. That is important, not only because, A, we know that you worked very hard on this budget, but it also represents the importance of this budget and how hard you actually did work on it throughout the months. As the mayor mentioned, while we were on recess during August, we know that many of you were working on this and working on this diligently for many months. We noticed, the public noticed, and I just want to make sure that you are all recognized for that. It's a total team effort, and the city is blessed to have a city management team that is just so on point with so much of this. And this budget has all the hallmarks of City Manager Miyake's budget because it's so balanced, which on my short time on the council, I think has been a hallmark of what you do so well. You've listened so well to the residents, to the stakeholders, to this council and our priorities and the projects therein, and that's really reflective in this budget. It certainly is. I will save a lot of my more specific questions as we get into some of these October and some November meetings. And I want to encourage all residents right now, please, throughout this process, the process is not over. As great as presentation that is, and as much as work that's been done so far, this is not over. So certainly during all these presentations, please provide feedback, ongoing feedback. Please show up on November 7th, the next public hearing, and share your thoughts or concerns if you have them during that time, because it's still very much working towards it. And I have to say, if there's one criticism I might have, it is not easily findable, this budget, on the website. It needs to be directly on the homepage and really accessible for every resident. If you just plug in budget into the search query, you're not going to find it. Only if you're very specific and put 2023, 2024 budget, and even then, there's multiple. So I just want to make it really easy for anyone who has an interest, wants to find out, please put that right on the homepage. I think that'd be really great. As liaison to the Human Services Commission, love what I've seen here in terms of the funding there. There is such a strong need to supporting all the great agencies and nonprofits in our city. If we all recall, we had requests for over $10 million last budget cycle, and we only had $5 million to disperse. So really appreciate that. The neighborhoods being so important here. Again, the council priorities. And really what I've heard time and time again is about what makes Bellevue so great. And we've heard some things tonight from oral communications as well as here about our neighborhoods, about our parks. But even above that, when we talk about some of the core services, public safety, clean streets, no graffiti, or graffiti that goes away quickly, garbage that goes away quickly. These are all the hallmarks of some of the things that our city has grown to be known for, and why people want to bring their business here, work here, live here, go to school here. We can't forget those things, and they certainly are not forgotten in this budget and have made this budget, I think, very, very, very strong. I think the B&O tax increase, thank you for mentioning that. That hasn't been increased since 1989, and it's a very, very small increase, as well as the property tax increase. Whenever I shared the one slide you had there about how very little comes to Bellevue from the property taxes, everyone's always very amazed by that, and that is an ongoing issue. One question that I would like, and I appreciate you have it on there about the risks. Going forward, I'd love to know what risks are we specifically going to be tracking, not in general terms, but in specific terms, and what very specific things will we be doing in order to counteract some of those risks? I'd be very interested, especially as we move forward, and especially when a lot of economists are looking at after the first of the year, potentially a mild recession. So I like to be watching that very closely, and very specific things that we will be watching closely. But I will stop there. But again, huge kudos to the whole city management team and everyone here that's been such a big part of this. Appreciate all of your hard work, and look forward to digging into this a little bit deeper over the next months and weeks, but great initial start. Thank you so much.
Did you want to respond to the question, or is that going to come back later?
We'll respond to the memory bank. I'll get you a specific list because we are tracking several things that are high on our list. Everything from inflation to cost of goods sold to the JOLT, which is the job data. We look at a lot of those items. The question is, many of them are out of our control to do much about, but we certainly are tracking them to pay attention. We also have other things that we'll look at, so we'll get you a full list, Deputy Mayor. Happy to do so. And we'll also definitely get the budget easier accessible on the front page. I commit to making that happen for you.
Thank you.
Anytime.
So it's really gratifying to have a retreat finally after COVID, and to talk about our goals and our visions, and then to see those reflected in this budget. So I really appreciate that. I do have one question. I know that historically there was a period of time where the council, this is before I was on the council, opted not to do the councilmanic property tax increase, and I just wonder what the impact of that was in the long term. Can you talk about that?
I could talk a little about that. So not taking the property tax at the time, the 1% councilmanic that happened, for what I can figure out, I was not here for all of that time, but it appears to be a decade or maybe more than that. Every time we increase the 1%, it's $500,000. So technically, it would be about $5 million or $8 million, I guess it would be a year, that could have been in our coffers and now is sitting banked at the county. Being banked at the county is also a good thing because it's still at your discretion as to when you want to use that and bring it back into the city when the appropriate time is for substantial need. So we didn't technically lose it for forever. It's still completely accessible to you. But not taking that does mean that our property tax is lower today than it would have been had it been taken. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, but you're not speaking also to how close on the edge we are of expenses versus revenues. So
yeah, so in the most manageable forecast, which is the most optimistic line, currently in 2025, I think we're less than $1 million apart from expenditures, and by the time you get to 2026, we're something like, I'm going to say 2.5.
That's about right.
Okay,
Correct.
$2.5 million apart in 2026. So had we been taking the property tax and been continuing to not just spend it on expenditures, but pushing it aside a bit, those gaps would have been closed. Is that the question at hand?
yeah,
Okay.
I think that's exactly right. Okay, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Well, I will also pile on the thank you to Brad, Tony, Evan, and all of the leaders and staff, because, I had an opportunity to get a little bit of a briefing beforehand, and every time I asked about a priority that we had been talking about, I was told, it's in there, it's in there, it's in there. So that, to me, is really a testament that, you're listening to the community, the council, and the things that we have been talking about. And I still remember 2 years ago, we were all on Zoom trying to talk about the budget and the things that we needed, and we had that huge laundry list of things that we were tracking. And this time around, what I see is that we've been talking about Vision Zero, affordable housing, homelessness, safe parking, environmental stewardship, litter cleanup, graffiti program, DEI, and inclusive economy. And as I look, it's all in there. So I just think it's really important to know that you have been doing that really thoughtful work of looking at the priorities and where are some areas that maybe can be a little bit more streamlined so that some of this funding and resources are now available for the things that we've been lifting up and we've been hearing about from the community. To me, that is a testament for why we are in great shape and we're getting good ratings from our community as well as our business community. When I think about then how we continue to focus on fiscal sustainability, and earlier we talked about pursuing grant funding, and we will continue to aggressively pursue our federal and state grant funding as well to advance some of these other things that maybe if we had some more funds we could move faster on. So I just wanted to confirm, I guess, a couple of things, and that is that the 1% banked is only on the 2023, so the thinking might be that in the mid-buy would be when we would have this conversation again about how we're doing, because the forecast will be more known by then and our costs. So we may be having this conversation again in a year about whether another 1% bank capacity might be needed to make the gap a little bit less so we don't go into 2025 with $1 million or more of a potential deficit. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And then the parks.
Let's let them answer it.
I think just to confirm, yes, the budget only includes bank capacity in 2023 of 1%. It does not include a bank capacity in 2024. Make sure I'm clear on that. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that. And, I think it's also important for the community to know that when they think about the property tax, only 10% of the tax actually goes to Bellevue. So when we talk about the modest 1% increase, as you said, it's $9 for the year. So I think that's important. And then the Parks and Open Space Levy would also be an addition to this, right?
Yes.
So those are good to know as well. And I look forward to having more conversation. I would say, along with the deputy mayor, the one area that we did chat about was human services funding. And although I'm glad to see that ARPA potentially can fill a gap as an interim, we talk a lot about the fact that one-time funds are not the sustainable solution. So I look forward to having more of that conversation about, how do we bridge that gap? Because when we ask the community to ask for what you need, then what did I hear? 10 million of asks, and the funding available is substantially less than that. So that is somewhere that a space that I would really like to better understand. And yeah, thank you.
And we'll make sure we include that as we gear up for next week's ARPA discussion, how the overlap between Human Service and ARPA and the Human Services Commission work, which won't be in front of you until October 24th. There's an overlap there, and Tony Esparza and our Michael Shiosaki will be here to help us navigate that question. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have lots of kudos to pass out, and I also have some questions. Do you think I have enough time to talk both?
Well, let's see. The maximum time we've gotten so far is 6 minutes, so I'll give you 6 minutes.
You. Kudos. Thank you, staff. I want to also thank the commissioners who help you. A lot of staff work got into this to come up with a budget, that you are able to present to us. And we want to thank the public. They provide us the support, understanding, and ultimately, they are paying for the money, and they approve what we're doing. And so we have a great city. Ultimately, also, we want to thank the city manager because he's responsible for all the products. And obviously, thank the council members who provide the policy and the guidance. But the point is, I want to make sure it's challenging, as the city manager mentioned, not just because of the condition, inflation, pandemics, and all the uncertainty that's coming up. And we also have regional issues, emerging issues we never anticipated. All these things you have to juggle. So thank you. Kudos. And finally, I do have some, not finally, but I do have some questions. One is that our biennial budget now is $2.2 billion. What was it last year? What's the increase? If I recall, well, I'll let you tell me.
It did, the last adopted budget was $1.7 billion. I'm not sure coming off the mid-buy amended budget. I don't have that number quickly in my memory bank right here, but I certainly can find it for you.
It's about 1.8, whatever.
Yeah, probably something along those lines, yeah.
$400 million increase.
Yeah.
That's 20%.
So there are things, yes.
Right, by number it's very, very big, but I think we need to tell the public, justify, and I think there's good reasons, okay? Explain it. Okay. And that also means going forward, I think we need to be looking at the structural deficit, which Councilmember Robertson mentioned, that we're not going to ever close it. So if we also depend on bank capacity, Councilmania, that's not a real fix. So maybe we need to do something different. And I think the council maybe have to come up with some policy decisions and priorities. Because one thing that Brad was mentioning, the challenge for a difficult budget is because we're not helping that much, because we want everything. And you are doing everything for us. So I think there's certain responsibility we have to have. Like, Deputy Mayor's asking questions. Can we do things a little bit differently? Can we build partnership? Can we do more private-public collaboration? I think these are all ways we talk about. We're lucky we have ARPA to help us in some way. So I think these are the things we need to really try to do to improve on the process, because not everything you guys can solve, because you are doing whatever we tell you to do. So it's amazing that you're able to do that, and thank you again for that. My question also is, you mentioned about bank capacity and Councilmania tax. Maybe you should explain a little bit what's bank, what's Councilmania. I ask the question, if we are banked, why do we need Councilmania? Do we have, are we limited to just 1%? Or can we banked a lot of percentages there. So what's the difference? What's the advantage we got in bank capacity?
So currently, the city has about $9 million of banked capacity, which equates to somewhere in the vicinity to 12 to 13%, depending on the value of assessed value. So it's somewhere right in that range. Under state law, the council can raise, with a vote of the council, property taxes for the city of Bellevue only by 1% each year. So that is within your authority. If you choose to use bank capacity, we have to prove a substantial need, but it's also within your authority to use. Councilmember Lee, does that respond to the question you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question was, why do we use Councilmania? Can we? Is it? You mentioned 1% is Councilmania, 1% is banked.
Right.
So what's the difference? Why don't we just use 2% banked?
You could choose to use 2%. You certainly absolutely could choose to use 2% banked and bank the 1% councilmanic. But I think we were thinking it was an easier to explain if we use our traditional 1% councilmanic every year and pull 1% of bank capacity. But if the council did choose, you could choose to use 2% of bank capacity and bank your 1%
so there's
councilmanic.
no financial strategic benefit.
There's no financial benefit to the
I just wonder, maybe one can preserve us more.
I think it would tap into our ability to use the bank capacity later.
Well, now or later probably doesn't matter, as long as we can issue Councilmania anyway. But that's okay. Thanks. That's good answer. Yeah. The other one is, you mentioned we refinance our debt. We have some savings, significant.
We did have significant.
What do we do with that saving we have?
Well, honestly, it helped pay for some of the new projects you see in the CIP. So we reduced our debt by somewhere in the vicinity of $4 million a year between the refunding we did on the 2012 and 2013 bonds, and then also our TIFIA loan that refunded. So we were able to save a substantial amount of debt service, which is actually a great deal to the taxpayers, because now we'll be able to invest those dollars back into the community. And so that money did go back into the capital improvement plan, and what you see is the ability to probably buy a few more projects than we wouldn't have been able to buy in the past.
Yeah. I think for the benefit of transparency and accountability, it probably be good to explain to us and the citizens the money is actually used, the amount that we save is used to offset certain necessary expenditures so that we don't have to add on to our increased tax burden. So I think that's very important. People see, wow, you're actually, responsible, and this doesn't, and we reduce our requirement because of our tax.
We can certainly provide.
Otherwise, it's just lost. So, well, what'd you do? Did you give the city council a big tax salary increase?
Okay, you're at your 6 minutes.
I got my, I would like to get 6 minutes of that service. Anyway, I was kidding you.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Okay.
Councilmember Barksdale, I'm going to let you tap into your bank capacity. Speaking time.
I'm ready.
You've got about 100 minutes.
Thanks. I'm going to further bank it until the specific study session dates. But I do just also want to say thanks to staff for addressing the priorities that cover the needs and interests of a diverse community. So really appreciate you balancing all of that. I'll just also ask a question around outreach. Are there plans to engage any organizations around the budget, like kind of doing a roadshow, specifically kind of thinking about our nonprofits, cultural-based organizations who may not be as plugged into the process?
Certainly. I don't have a specific roadshow that I could produce, but I certainly am willing to go to any nonprofit, any entity that would like to hear a presentation on the budget. I am more than happy to make that happen. If someone would like me to come and do that, I am completely available. We usually always do a piece with the Bellevue Downtown Association and the Chamber, but that's a different audience, I think, than what you're thinking of. But if there is a path forward, I'm happy to do so.
Okay. Yeah, I would recommend and would like to see that, especially given that we are doing it in the community already. And also maybe to some of our boards, commissions. I'm especially thinking of CCC, for example, but others are also relevant. Youth Link. Okay. But maybe others are also relevant as well.
Okay. I'll work with the city manager on those.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Happy to do so.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful start of a big process, and thank you for listening to us.
Thank you very much for having us this evening.
Okay. I would take a break, but I won't, because I'm so excited to have our next study session item. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce?
Sure. Thank you. We have more good news on the way here. Our last study session topic is an update on the City of Bellevue's Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. This study is an informational update. The self-evaluation serves as a comprehensive review of programs, activities, and services operated by the cities as it relates to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Joining us this evening is Joyce H. Germain, our Human Resources Director, as well as Blaine Amson, ADA Title VI Civil Rights Administrator, also with Human Resources. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joy to kick off the presentation, and then we'll hear from Blaine as well. Joy?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, and City Council members. I'm Joy St. Germain, Human Resources Director. As an opener to what you're about to hear, I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight an important facilities project from staff in the Finance and Asset Management Department that's currently in development and not in Blaine's current progress report, and that is the City Council Chambers ADA upgrade project. It's about 90% completed. So phase one of the project involves the removal of seats in the back of the chambers to allow wheelchair access. There'll be 2 spaces in the back and then 3 along the windows here. So to show you, so on the screen it's a photo of the seat signage that states, please make this seat available for companions of wheelchair users when needed, which is a wonderful statement of compliance and cultural competence. Phase 2 of the project involves the handrail replacement. So you'll see the blue tape here for this work in progress. And then phase 3 plans to replace this table where Blaine and I are sitting with an oval table design that will provide more space for wheelchair accessibility, as well as moving this audio visual box so it's reachable by wheelchair users. So this is a great example of the one city approach that involves every city department to ensure that city programs, services, and activities are accessible to individuals with disabilities. I would like to give special thanks and acknowledgement to every department director and their Americans with Disabilities Act core team members for their ongoing positively impactful work. And I'd like to now acknowledge and thank Blaine Amson for his effective leadership, expertise, and remarkable accomplishments, who will share the progress report.
Thank you so much, Joy. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members, and City Manager. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to report on our progress of the City's Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. I am, in fact, Blaine Amson. I am, in fact, the Americans with Disabilities Act and Title VI Civil Rights Administrator for the City of Bellevue, and I am, in fact, with the Human Resources Department. My presentation for you today is information only and is an update on the progress made toward meeting our regulatory requirements related to the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'll start with a bit of background to orient everyone to what we're talking about tonight and why it's important. Then I'll talk through the self-evaluation and transition plan subsections, where we have specific strategies and have made progress toward achieving our goals in these areas. So, what is the self-evaluation and transition plan, and why do we need to talk about its progress? As we think about the ADA, one of the first things that may come to mind is the role it plays in making sure folks can be reasonably accommodated in employment. And that's actually Title I of the ADA, which the rest of our Human Resources Department helps to ensure. Title II of the ADA is my responsibility. That's the one that requires that government entities be accessible in our facilities, our infrastructure, and in our programming. In order to track whether we're upholding the law, we regularly update something called a Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan, or SETP for short, which we last updated for the city in 2019. The Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan is the way we evaluate all of our city programs, services, and infrastructure for ADA compliance and accessibility, and to make recommendations for improvements. While these self-evaluation transition plan recommendations were created, the way that we track and operationalize these improvements is through department-level work plans. The ADA core team is the primary group that works with me on this responsibility at the City of Bellevue. Many departments have a core team member or members who oversees the completion of the departmental work plan. As a group, the ADA core team supports all members in accountability and information sharing to ensure that we're compliant in all areas of the city and thinking of ways that we can be innovative and increase accessibility wherever we can. Obviously, compliance with the law is required, but as a city that welcomes the world, Bellevue takes its accessibility seriously, and we've done some great work going above and beyond compliance as well. To live up to that expectation, during this update, we solicited feedback from the community, not just on compliance-based improvements, but suggestions that just made sense that may go above and beyond what the law requires. An example of this actually comes from y'all. When I brought this to you in 2019, you asked me for an example of community feedback that went above and beyond compliance, but was a really good idea. I told you about a mother who shared with me that if we had accessible changing tables like the one found at Inspiration Playground throughout the city, it would help promote community inclusion. As you heard recently, we're on track to install 13 changing tables at various locations across the city, making this mother's vision come to fruition and helping to ensure people with disabilities are able to be as integrated in the community as they want to be. Indeed, Bellevue sees its diversity as a core strength and the disability community as an important part of that diversity, making the ADA and the Diversity Advantage Initiative closely tied. So what you'll hear about tonight is just a sampling of our progress on projects within the Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan to meet compliance, but also to honor our disability diversity, innovate, and go beyond basic compliance as well. Effective communications is the first subsection of the Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. Communicating effectively with individuals with disabilities in our community is an important responsibility that promotes equal access to services and information. The city facilitates accessibility and effective communication with individuals in a variety of ways. Just some examples of things we've done since 2019 that have made communications more accessible include captioning on Bellevue television programming, consistent use of alternate format statements that appear on all city marketing and communications materials, and clearly detail who to contact for modification requests. And instituting more accessible forms for people when signing up to speak at city council meetings. We've also improved accessibility in our city style guide. This is a roadmap of sorts for city staff who create public-facing materials, which now includes standards for accessibility in digital and print materials. Under the Accessible Meetings and Events subsection of the Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan, we've produced for the City of Bellevue staff a guide on universal design specific to meetings, trainings, and events. This helps to ensure that we're designing events and programming that are accessible to everyone. This guide has been requested by other jurisdictions as a model of accessibility, and we're happy to share it far and wide. We've also made physical modifications to city facilities to ensure that our meetings accommodate all participants through accessible heights for meeting tables and hearing assistance technology features in key meeting rooms all across the city. And we've embraced virtual meeting formats, initially as a necessity during our COVID response, but now recognizing that virtual formats often work so much better for folks with disabilities. We plan on keeping those up. In city policies and practices, we're teaching staff members about reasonable modifications and why they're necessary and important. When we change policies or practices, we think about both compliance with Title II of the ADA and how ableism might be considered in how we evolve our services and our programs. Ableism is the notion that people without disabilities are the norm, and systems should be designed only with their needs considered and met, often neglecting the legitimate needs of those with disabilities. When we intentionally center people with disabilities in our policy creation and our decision making, it helps us to be more equitable. And we make a real effort to build authentic relationships and involve members of the community who have disabilities as our partners when we design and develop equitable policies, practices, and programs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, maintaining connections with our disability community was critical, and our emergency management crews were committed to reaching our most vulnerable residents to check in and to ensure that they were staying safe and healthy. There was also some innovative work done to ensure that our emergency shelters considered and were prepared with supplies designed for residents with disabilities, something not very many jurisdictions were doing, we found. These teams are also trained in identifying and preventing ableism in their work. The shelter management plan being just one example of where staff recognized that planning shelter supplies with only the able-bodied in mind would leave many community members without their key needs met. In the city's public safety function, training is being evaluated to ensure responders are attuned to reasons why someone might not be able to hear or respond to commands, for example, and how to recognize when someone may have certain needs during an interaction. Bellevue Police has many advisory councils for different affinity groups, and we're actively having conversations about how we can ensure people with disabilities are centered in all of those activities. We've identified and removed barriers that were impeding people with disabilities from accessing our probation services on everything from forms to physical space configuration. And equity training related to emergency response is happening across our police and fire functions, as well as throughout the organization in other areas as well. As it relates to city facilities, I am so pleased to report that we've installed 9 wheelchair charging stations across the city and at community centers and key hubs such as City Hall and Bellevue Botanical Gardens. This means that people using motorized wheelchairs can stay out and about in the community without fear of having their battery die and leaving them stranded. We do annual checks on ADA access features in all of our facilities. And we've operationalized using universal design concepts and centering accessibility in our facilities projects as a whole. Lastly, infrastructure. Public right-of-way is a huge element of the ADA and an area where many people often experience accessibility or lack of accessibility in a city. I love sharing these numbers. Over 18,000 linear feet of sidewalks in Bellevue have been added or made more accessible in just the last 2 years. It blows my mind. We've added or upgraded more than 100 curb ramps and are adding more accessible pedestrian signals, which means they have both visual and auditory alerts. And we're consistently assessing and improving our outreach and our inreach to the disability community to better understand the needs and the gaps. This means that not only is transportation getting better at reaching out to the community, but that we've made tons of improvements to processes, making it easier for the community to reach back to us and report a public right-of-way concern. So we're doing a lot, and it's really exciting. One of the reasons why we can do so much and we think about accessibility beyond compliance is that we have strong leadership support at every level of the city. In a recent city council proclamation, we stated that our commitment to diversity in Bellevue is specifically related to diversity within our disability community. This proclamation was celebrating our 32nd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a key piece of this statement was that we, quote, consistently and diligently work to make our city more accessible to all. And that makes me so honored to be a part of this team and the city doing this work that I get to do here in Bellevue. It's in that spirit that we're not waiting until the next update to share this progress with the community and to solicit feedback for improvement. In fact, just a few months ago, I went in front of Bellevue Network on Aging, provided them with this same progress update, and got more suggestions from them that are in line with ongoing efforts related to effective communication and more. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to the ADA core team. The work that I'm honored to bring in front of you tonight has so much more to do with their efforts than my own. And thank you to the leadership teams and to all the city staff who are so dedicated to this work. And thank you to council for your support, commitment, and dedication to these efforts. Speaking from experience, I can tell you that municipal understanding and support of the needs of people with disabilities makes a huge difference, and it increases confidence and effectiveness in our local governments. Again, this presentation is for information only, so there's no action being requested at this time, but I would welcome your questions, or you can find my email contact info on the screen or in your packets. Thank you for your time and for your interest.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Zahn will just go around down. Do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Blaine and Joy, for coming and giving us this presentation. I think that one of the things that I've really appreciated about the work that you do, that we're doing together, is about accessibility by design. So planning for that from the very beginning, because as you said, when we create accessible spaces, infrastructure, it actually is better for everyone. And so instead of designing for the ableism, the other pieces actually just work for everyone. So I really appreciate that. I guess in light of the fact that we are talking about the budget tonight, I am curious about what are some of the elements that you're hearing from the community as feedback that is important to include either in the capital or the operating budget to make sure that we are moving even faster in creating right-of-ways that are accessible. And I'm thinking especially during construction, because we have a lot of spaces that are in construction where it's not always clear to me that there's accessibility for folks in a wheelchair. So I'm curious about what you're hearing and what's already included in our budget.
I don't know a lot about kind of what's included in our budget. What I can tell you is that the self-evaluation and transition plan, specifically that we brought you in 2019, has a 5-year span that looks from 2020 through. And so all of those pieces that have been included and kind of massaged into those work plans have already been kind of considered into budgets. I don't know, Joy, if you want to add anything else, or I'm also happy to kind of go back. It sounds like what you're asking about for the most part is related to kind of public right-of-way and construction projects. So I'm happy to go back and kind of massage that a little bit and get back to you with an answer.
That would be helpful, because I think that actually it's in a couple of areas. When I think about city facilities, you know, we've talked about City Hall and having, right, charging for wheelchairs, but
Yeah.
it makes me wonder about what about all of the other city facilities throughout the city? And then, yes, the public right-of-way as well. And I guess my other part of that question would be, you know, we have a lot of dashboards in the city so that people can see the progress that we're making over time. So as we're thinking about these different investments that we're making in our facilities and right-of-way, is there a way for our community to be seeing the kind of progress and what they can expect from us in terms of the level of progress that we're making? So what I mean by that is, in 2 years and 5 years, how many more linear feet of accessible sidewalks are we committing to, so that we are making really visible the work that we're doing and the commitment we're making into our community?
Thank you. Great thoughts.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. As we all know, Bellevue's motto is "We welcome the world." Right? It's easy to say it, but it's very difficult to do it. And so we appreciate you being an advocate, being here to, you with your real experience and the willingness, the ability to help, to bring the issues to the table and help us how to make a difference. And we just talked about the budget, $2.2 billion every 2 years. That's a lot of money. It's a matter of priority. We have to make the priority. What is more important? Sometimes it's what do you call demand. Lots of people asking for. In this case, it may not necessarily be demand, but it's the necessity. It's important. So I believe that you can help to, like Councilmember Zhang mentioned, show and help us to understand what are the most critical needs and what we can do, so that the people, who are disabled, who needs help, assistance, can feel just like all of us. It doesn't matter who we are. We want to feel we are welcome, that we belong, that people take us for what we are and help us. Don't take us for granted. So it takes sometimes two-way communication, unfortunately. We got so many things, we have so much challenges, as you can see, even the budget process. So thank you for doing this, bring to attention, help us to design. When you just mentioned you designed the table, I wasn't aware of that, right? I mean, you don't think about things like that. So it's important to have those projects and remind us to come to us. So thank you for what you do, and keep working with all of us, see what we can do to make things better and easier.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Joy, Blaine, thank you for the amazing presentation and the work and seeing where we are as a city when it comes to making our spaces more accessible and welcoming. Blaine, I just have to say, I really appreciate your enthusiasm on the topic. It means a lot. So we prioritize this work in the private sector and in the tech industry. But I think by far, I think I've seen the most enthusiasm here today. So thank you for that. One quick question. When you mentioned that we have style guides and our print and digital material, there's a focus on accessibility. I just wanted to confirm that that's true for our website and our app. Is that true?
So it sure is. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So that style guide, so there's kind of two different pieces to that. There's definitely the universal design for meetings, trainings, and events. Gives you little tidbits that definitely would be useful for a website, for an app, for those sorts of things. But there absolutely is an emphasis within the style guide, and in fact, we're kind of working on a new updated style guide as we speak. There's already conversations happening that look specifically at kind of digital spaces and It's interesting you bring up the app. You know, that's something that I'm going to write down as we speak and make sure that we're taking a look at. But absolutely building those concepts of universal design, making sure it's got the highest usability is something that we've focused on the website, at least since I've gotten here, and we've started having more robust conversations about universal design in digital spaces.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks.
Oops, I skipped you.
You want to go to Deputy Mayor first? No, go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
I'll be quick. Yeah, ditto what everyone else said. I think this is pretty exciting, and this is a really good news story. You know, when I first joined the council, I remember meeting with the then ADA coordinator, and they'd taken a Segway and they'd ridden all of the sidewalks across the city. I'm sure you still have that report. We're chipping away at it. But back then, ADA was really only looked at about wheelchair accessibility. It wasn't looked at all the other potential differing abilities like vision and hearing and other things. And now we are. I think it's part of walking our talk about Bellevue welcoming the world. We welcome everyone. And it's also part of our implementation of DEI. So I'm really excited to see the really great progress. I mean, we've done some great things. The changing table, I'm so glad that we had 13. I remember saying, we need to do more of that. The universal design that we're bringing, the hearing loop system, all those things. And I want to give a special shout out. I mean, the staff is doing so much work, but Mayor Robinson, when she joined the council, that was, I think, the first time I ever heard about universal design. And she's been a real change agent for universal design, for the hearing loop system, because she knows, because of her day job, about what is needed to make people be able to participate and be included. So thank you. Lynn, for that, because you really have helped move this along, and I think that should be noted. So just positive comments. I'm really happy to see us moving along, happy to see that this work has continued to be funded. I do have one question. I think I've raised this before with regard to one of the other universal design type things when it comes to print materials or website materials or when you're looking on your phone, and that is the colors. We have a certain percentage of our population that's colorblind, and there are some things that have come to council where I know people who are colorblind, they can't tell the lines from, which ones represents which. So I just hope that that's on our radar for ways to make it. Maybe the colors may not look as beautiful to someone who's not colorblind, where they might go, why are you using this color? But if it makes it so that everyone can see those subtleties, I think it matters. So.
Well, if I may, just quickly give you an example of what you see in the style guide and where you see this integration. I got so excited when I saw Tony and Evan's presentation, because as you saw those projections, right, and you saw the squares and the triangles and the circles, that is exactly for the reason you described. Because if somebody was colorblind, they wouldn't know. If he said green, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know orange, but he said green and triangles, green and squares. And that's not only training, because Evan went to our graphic design team and said, how do I make this work for the most people? That's what we've trained. We've got a culture change here that trains people that if you're creating something for the community, you need to create it so it works for everyone. And we have, as I mentioned, a graphics team who's been trained in universal design who implemented just that one little change. But because of that, it doesn't matter if you can see the color. It works for everyone across the board. So I agree with you. We need to do better, but you can see it just tonight. And I got so excited, that enthusiasm you're talking about. I got so excited, because there it is. There it is. We're getting better.
Thank you. No, because you've heard me with that comment before. I didn't realize that we were already doing it.
Yeah, it's there.
And I'm super excited, and I'm really proud of this organization for being so inclusive of everyone.
Me too.
To find ways to make it so everyone can get the same information.
Thank you.
So thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think the council members and colleagues here really made some great discussion and talking about things, and I really appreciate that. I remember going to the Bellevue Network on Aging when I was first or second year here in council meeting, and had a presentation on design, and I know there's some real changes, some real improvements and all that. Something's really gotten into more and more into the public working on that. So that's really great. And talking about enthusiasm, everybody's raised a lot of these other things. What I want to do is personally, because it really makes me very excited about this and what the work you're doing and remembering a lot of things. I spent from late 80s to, late 60s actually to mid 80s as a regional attorney for HEW in Dallas, 5-state region. And we had the, Title VI, Civil Rights Act, and then Title IX, and then ADA. And it was really amazing to see that. And it's taken so damn long to get to where we are. But it's just so exciting, and your enthusiasm reminds me of that. And that's what it takes to get these things done, is to have the knowledge, and you're extremely knowledgeable in this and articulate, but having that enthusiasm is great. It really just made me all excited about remembering a lot of that stuff, and even into private practice there in Dallas. And so I'm just very pleased you're here and that you're helping us move this forward. And anything we can all do and I can do to help you, that we'd be very much appreciate you doing that, because it's very important. And when we say, Bellevue welcomes the world, our diversity is our strength, and I say we really mean it, and this is part of it. So thank you very much, and looking forward to the work and all of us working with you on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure I can add too much more. My colleagues have covered this ground quite well, but Blaine Joy, thank you so much for the presentation. And Blaine, I would call it passion more than enthusiasm, although, but the way your eyes light up with that one example is just, it's what makes you so effective, and I so appreciate that. And I appreciate the rundown of all the improvements. Yes, from as simple as having a mic so that you can grab and move closer to you, but the charging stations, which I think is huge, the curb ramps, 102, fantastic, the sidewalks, the accessible pedestrian signals. I mean, went on, and every day we are getting closer and closer. As you said, we're not there yet, but every day we're getting closer to being, that city that truly welcomes the world and in an inclusive way. So I'm so excited and proud of the work that you're doing. So keep it up, and I really look forward to hearing more. The only question that I have for tonight was that you mentioned you're doing some more outreach to learn about what other things the community is concerned about, or ideas that they have. I'm just curious how you're going about that outreach, and are you using more traditional channels that we use as a city, or are you using different channels? I was kind of curious how you're soliciting that feedback, and then kind of how that feedback loop works and how it goes into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I think the example that I gave you about virtual spaces was so important, and it was kind of this aha moment, because I'll be honest, when we did this original update to the self-evaluation and transition plan, using those traditional channels for outreach was difficult. It was really difficult, because you're asking folks with disabilities to maybe get on a bus, to get off a bus, to get into a building they've never been into before, and to show up for you in a community center. And they said, we're not coming, basically. And so what we discovered is two things. One, really being able to create authentic relationships. And sometimes that means somebody calls me and says, hi, there's a branch on the sidewalk, and I just wanted you to know that my wheelchair can't get through. And I say, great, we're right on that. And also, let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's build a relationship. Who do you know? Who do I know? Let's relate on wheelchair level. How can I make a connection, right? Creating an authentic connection in that way. But also, that virtual space dynamic, that's the ticket. Folks with disabilities will jump on a Zoom call. They were eager, so we worked on a Coal Creek project update with King County, solicited feedback, largely virtual because we were in the pandemic, heard robust, interesting, valuable feedback that we'd never heard before, that we can apply not just to the Coal Creek update project, but to the rest of the projects that are happening throughout the park system. So it seems like we've cracked something with this virtual environment, virtual spaces, and one of the things that staff is talking about across the spectrum is making sure that we don't lose that, and we continue to have hybrid options available in our community feedback efforts, but also just in our community programming in general, because it works for a lot of people. So I think those are the two ways, really creating those authentic relationships that sometimes start with a concern. and going from there, building that authentic relationship so they know the next time, reach out to me. You know my name is Blaine. You know I'm going to pick up the phone. I got you. And so does the rest of the transportation department or parks or what have you.
Very good. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, I love this presentation, and I just wouldn't be me if I didn't have some more I want you to do. So, so I really appreciate all that you've done and all the work you're doing in the council chambers. I ask that you consider work on the dais as well, because when we have people with disabilities in leadership, I want to make sure they can get up and sit here comfortably, number one. Number two, I'd love to not have the ADA information embedded in the website. I'd love to have it front and center for people who, whether they want to visit someplace or they want to go to a park or they want to know if they can rent equipment somewhere, that they can find it easily on our website. And to your point, Blaine, it'd be great if the My Bellevue app makes it really easy for people with disabilities to report challenges that they come upon.
Thank you.
Also, okay. So I'd love to have you partner with Visit Bellevue and have them kind of look at how does this become a destination place for people with disabilities. I had a friend visit who's in a wheelchair over the summer, and we got a room at a hotel, and I call it faux ADA because it looked good to me. But when we went in, the shower was reversed. And so it was like it had the equipment but wasn't installed correctly. And we had to check out. We couldn't use it. And so we found another place that was really accommodating and very comfortable for her. But it was amazing that this hotel that everybody goes to and that it looked really good on paper was not functional for somebody with a disability. So it'd be nice to try to give tutorials to the hotels and the restaurants, make sure that they are actually accessible. And then the last thing is, as we look at Wilburton, you know, we have such an amazing opportunity to create a neighborhood that truly is accessible and embraces everybody. So I hope that you are being tapped in our conversations when we think of design and what we can do there. So city manager, we make sure that we're working with his department on that. Okay, great, and with Joy as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, that was the last thing on our agenda, so our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.